Then just to say a quick few words. So my name is Andrea Gibbons. I'm the network coordinator with Food for Life get-togethers. And so we're a program of the Soil Association that's really all about bringing people together through how we grow, access, cook, and share food. Thinking about how we build our well-being and build our connections to the land and to each other through how and what we eat. And so it's these sessions are part of this effort to sort of connect people across the country and the world increasingly around some of the key issues and key work that's happening in local communities, and beginning to think about how kind of this is a very bottom up. Obviously, the Soil Association is a much bigger organization that deals with farming, regenerative forestry, kind of growing at scale, as well as these community projects. So really thinking about how we're tackling climate change from the ground up and through some of these activities, as well as this just being a key response to the many issues that we're facing now, especially the increasing food crisis. So we'll be having more stuff on that in the future, I think. But so I think the work that TAWS does just kind of connects with this bigger, like this stuff at so many levels, and it's very exciting to be able to now hand over to Vicky Hemming, who is from TAWS, and she'll sort of be leading the rest of the session. But yeah, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm from TAWS, and if you're wondering what that means, it's the Active Wellbeing Society. We're based in Birmingham, and I'll tell you a little bit more about us shortly. But I'm just going to load up the presentation for you. If you just give me a second, hopefully you can see that. Because I wanted to just start by sort of explaining why we've put this session on, although I think a lot of it is quite apparently obvious. But, you know, food is such a great way of bringing people together, and we've just come out of COVID and people have never been so socially isolated, and it's such a good way of bringing communities together. And, you know, it's, you know, that against the backdrop of the cost of living crisis, you can't escape those headlines, can you? And the reality that people really need access to hot food more than ever. And I don't know about other cities, but in Birmingham, over 40% of children live in poverty, and that is a huge number. So I think anything that can help inspire people to set up community meals, you know, community cafes, provisions along those lines, it's all for the good, really. So we thought we'd try and set up a practical session, be backed up by a guide, so you'll get all the many more details in the guide. This is more of a top line. But we thought if we set up a practical session, at best, it will inspire people to perhaps look at setting one up themselves, or at worst, open your eyes as to what it involves. And I started off as a volunteer in a local community cafe, and I absolutely loved it. And if I wasn't in my current role now, which is running community cafes, I would definitely be at this session looking at what it takes to set something up. So I'd say that. And last thing before I move on is we've got a map there in the bottom right hand corner of the slide, and that's a map of hot food provisions and food banks in Birmingham. Not everybody is on there, but it's just so that we can help those in need access hot food and also food to cook with. But there aren't that many hot food provisions in Birmingham, so we're trying to promote, you know, this so that more people can potentially set them up, so that it improves access, really. So I'm just going to move on. Yeah, so we've got some great speakers here today. It's not just me, which is good news, I think. We've got a food cycle, and we're also going to go live to a community lunch that's happening in Shirley, which is in Birmingham, to meet Andrea, who is the associate pastor, who is going to let us have a bird's eye view of what goes on at her community lunch, and hopefully we'll be able to ask us some questions if the internet's good enough when we go over there. We've also got Food Cycle, who are helping with the practical steps of setting up a community cafe. So it's really nice to have them on board to collaborate with. Food Cycle's a national charity that aims to make food poverty, loneliness and food waste a thing of the past for every community. They've got lots of community cafes nationally. They offer free, permanent, weekly communal meals with a warm welcome and a delicious vegetarian meal. And you will meet Pamela and Alice, who are from the development team, giving us some pearls of wisdom today. So welcome to them. And last but not least, we've got Estelle that is also going to join us when we talk about you know, volunteers are really key to running this sort of thing. Estelle has got a lot of varied experience in being a volunteer in various food projects, and she's going to give her perspective on, you know, what makes a good experience to volunteer and how to attract them. And then just a little bit about the Active Wellbeing Society. We work with communities in Birmingham where inequalities are at their highest to improve their physical and mental well-being. We've got lots of activities and services that we offer, but people need to be well fed to even start to engage in these. So we run 3 community cafes across the city. We use surplus food to cook with, and it's on a pay-as-you-feel basis, of which I'll talk more about when we get into this. And just so you know what to expect, really, we've got some practical steps about, you know, identifying the need, what's in the area already, how to find a location. And that's the bit that Food Cycle are going to do, which is fantastic. And we're going to move on to some other topics. But we'll be looking at the different types of provisions that people set up, the different types of community cafes or lunches. We've got a couple of really good examples, one of which is panning live to Andrea in Shirley. And then we've got some breakout groups for the final 15 minutes. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavour. And we are also going to send out a guide as well with all the details in there. But first of all, this is my cue just to play you. It's a very short 1-minute video that the BBC took for Comic Relief this year from our community cafes, and it just gives you a flavour of why we do what we do, really, and an insight into one. So let me try and smoothly switch to the video. So
I cook for people who need a hot meal. We're on the front line and we can actually see that people are struggling. They've lost their jobs. Some of them have lost their homes. People have isolated, they're lonely. The food that we cook all comes from fair share. We turn it into meals.
What are we cooking today, Christine?
Vegetable curry with cardamom and rice. If we weren't here, I just don't know where they would be able to get meals.
When I was stuck indoors, I found it difficult. This is one of my highlights of the week.
Seeing the people actually queuing up, needing help. If we weren't here, they wouldn't be able to feed themselves and their families. I actually know how they're feeling. I've been there. The donations are really, really needed. They're a human being and everyone needs a meal to survive.
Right, so that was Christine, who's one of our lead cooks actually at the community cafe, and yeah, she's wonderful. She is definitely passionate about cooking and passionate about her community. So I'm actually going to hand over to Pamela and Alice now.
Hello.
Okay.
So I'm Pamela, and as Vicky said, I'm half of Food Cycle's development team. So really what we spend a large part of our day doing is identifying areas where within communities where Food Cycle could make a difference to people living locally, venues from which our service could run, and addressing any problems encountered in the course of trying to get these projects set up. We'll touch upon all 3 of these in this brief section, and we'll be able to answer any of your questions a bit later on. Next slide, please. So identifying areas where you can make a difference. This has got two aspects really. Contacting and building relationships with relevant local groups and organisations, and secondly, research of the local area, which the second of which Alice is going to outline for you shortly. Alice leads on research for the charity. For the first part then, you'll need to understand what relevant services are currently running, when they run and where they run from. This is to make sure that you're not going to be a duplicating service in an area that you've identified. Duplication, it's frustrating in itself, but it also means you're diluting the resources not only for your service, but for existing services in the area, because surplus food availability is finite. And your pool of potential volunteers is going to be diluted too. But also, these are the organisations that are going to be able to offer you advice and guidance and possibly resources. So it's just another reason to play nicely, really. And the next slide, thank you. So to identify these relevant local groups and organisations, you'll want to start by contacting your local CVS, the Council Voluntary Service. They're going to be aware of all the groups and organisations that are already providing a not-for-profit food service within your area of interest. And they're going to be able to introduce you to the local network of food providers as well, which, for example, in Birmingham is the Food Justice Network. It could also be the Food Poverty Alliance or the Food Power Network or something similar. CVS are also going to have details of your council's food insecurity manager, or they might be called your community engagement officer or similar, and your own ward councillors. They're going to have some knowledge of what's already running in the area. They can introduce you to the organisations providing a service. Many faith groups too will be providing a service. Look on their websites, phone them, ask and you will receive. Sorry, I couldn't resist that one. So what you want from these organisations and networks is to build a map of existing services so that you can identify an area of unmet need. And the final one for me. So this map of existing provision, it should answer what's currently on offer in your area in terms of food provision. What does that look like? For example, is it free hot meals like Food Cycle? Is it a pay-as-you-feel community cafe, community pantry service, etc.? And you want to know how often these run and where from. You're basically building a picture of your area so that you can see where you could best add value. And I'll pass you to my colleague Alice.
So hi everyone, as Pamela said, I lead on research for the charity, so this is kind of my little bit. So in tandem with making local connections with the CVS, the council and other groups and organisations, it's also really useful to do your own sort of desk-based research into your desired area, just so you can see where your service will be best placed and who your guests are likely to be as well. This basically just ensures that you're setting up in the right location and that you're also understanding how best to target your guests and promote your service in advance of it being up and running. Also, if you're applying for funding for your projects, it's sometimes useful to evidence in your application that you've researched the level of need and how you're going to add value to the local community too. So at Food Cycle, our initial research aims to answer the following questions. So the first one, which is this lovely little map on your screen, is where are the most deprived wards in the area? So you can look at deprivation maps and things like that. And the next one, where are the places to consider for those who are the most socially isolated and vulnerable to loneliness? Age UK has some great resources, including a loneliness heat map, so you can just sense check that you're going to be in the right area for that. And the next one is where and what is the existing provision to avoid duplication? Some council websites have this, a list of their food banks. So the picture there is just of Swansea Food Bank, as Swansea Council, who have listed all their food banks in the area, but also you can Google things like food banks in area, check Facebook pages, because often smaller organisations don't have websites, local news articles as well, but more often than not, you're hearing from the people who Pamela's previously mentioned about what's already operating in your area. And then the final 2 points, the final 2 questions you want to answer are: where are the optimum area for you to travel to, and how well connected is the area for surplus food and volunteers? So this just involves having a look through Google Maps to check journey times, local amenities and public transport networks, just to make sure that you're not completely isolated from people and you're asking people to travel large distances. And so the object of this is collating all this information helps us to rule out areas that may be suggested to us from local groups and organisations, but which may not be practical to set up with our resources and requirements. So after this initial research, you can look on more targeted research. So I've just listed here on the PowerPoint sort of key indicators which you want to look into, which will provide you a picture of who your local community is. So this information can be found at ward level on your council's website, but if that's lacking, then you can always have a look at census data from 2011. So we've still not got the new one online as well. And this targeted research will be vital towards designing your service. For example, if you discover that lots of households in the area are composed of families with young children, you'll most likely mould your service to suit their needs by making it earlier in the day and engaging with local schools and youth services so that prospective guests know of the service that you offer. And you'll most likely find as well, if this all seems a bit too daunting, that the connections you make with the people Pamela's outlined previously, you won't have to do this by yourself. You can often ask people for help to point you in the right direction and give you any data which you want to know on an area too. So the next slide. So after you've kind of decided on your area, you want to be able to find a suitable venue within that area. So just have a think about what you need in terms of resources and equipment. Do you need a semi-commercial kitchen? Do you need a 6-hob cooker? How big does your kitchen need to be? And always think about the dignity of your guests as well. So you don't want them queuing on a busy road. You want them to have plenty of dining space. You don't want it to feel cramped. Ideally, you'll have potential venues suggested to you through the relationships you've built up, but you can always approach local faith groups as they've got venues for hire, or you could ask your local community centre too if they could hire out a space. Some councils as well also provide a list of all the community centres which they oversee, but if in doubt, Google Maps is great. You can just use the nearby feature and have a look for community centres or churches in the area, and it's a great start just to get in contact with them and see where you're at. And next slide. So these are just kind of our potential hitches which we've had with setting up projects. Some potential venues and community partners prefer a referral system as opposed to an open door policy that Food Cycle has, so we kind of have to bear that in mind with what they want. Often there's finite food surplus resources too, especially in an area where there is already existing services. So you just got to bear that in mind with the resources you've got, if you can pay for food too. The availability of volunteers, the cost of hire, as venues have been closed for 2 years and utilities are rising, so make sure you've got the resources to hire a venue if they're not for free. And previously, especially during COVID, lots of groups just plonk themselves down and not taking into consideration existing services, or they've actually taken resources from existing services. So you just need to make clear that the work you're doing is to prevent that, and you're not going to be doing the same thing that they have. So the final slide, our advice is volunteer in an appropriate not-for-profit food service, i.e. like Food Cycle. You're more than welcome to volunteer with us first, just to get a feel of it, build up contacts, and it will also encourage you through the process, because it's quite a lengthy process, and it will remind you what you're doing it for in the first place. And along the way, feel free to reach out to any contacts you make. They're there to reassure you, and 9 times out of 10 they're really lovely and supportive of what you're doing. So that is it from Food Cycle.
It is, yeah. Thank you very much for your words of wisdom through all the experience you've had in sourcing places and setting them up. Really, really good of you to come, actually. Yes, well, we can't not mention the food safety and environmental health element of setting up food. You know, if you're anyone preparing food for the public does actually need to register as a food business if you're going to be preparing food on a regular basis, like at least monthly, they recommend. But it's really hard when you go on their website or food safety website, trying to find any signposting to how to set up and what are the rules and regulations if you're a small community setting. It's actually really hard to find any advice at all. We've looked and we've contacted the FSA, the Food Safety Agency, and they are fast tracking an action to try and make it, the signposting, a lot clearer for people, because they recognise that more than ever communities are stepping in to support people, and they need to support because, you know, you're not a busy restaurant where you've got to have, you know, many bits of paperwork, and, you know, it can be made a little bit simpler. But there's no doubt that if you're going to do something on a regular basis, cooking for people, that you would need to register as a food business, and then come round and do an inspection. But what the environmental health officers have done, or the Food Standards Agency have done, is create a pack for small businesses, which also includes community settings, and it's called Safer Food, Better Business for Caterers. And it's without the jargon, and I've had a look through. We use it in our cafes, and it just takes you through step by step the things you need to be mindful of, and then it gives you some idea of the paperwork that you need to do as well. So it tries to make it more simple. We will have more information that they've sent us in the guide that we'll do, but I'm trying to keep it top line now, you know, so we get through it. Food handlers, you know, will need to have their food hygiene training, which is quite easily accessible online. And it's great if there is one person that's just accountable for food safety in general. And of course, allergens, you can see this around you. They're more important. It's more important than ever to be really clear if there's any allergens in your food. So, for example, this is one piece of our paperwork where everything we cook, we list the allergens there. And there are links to free allergen training, which we provide that link. But I think for me, if I was setting something up, I'd be looking through the Safer Food for Better Business, but I would want to go to somewhere that was doing something like I wanted to do, like someone already doing a community meal. And what does that look like in reality? How many pieces of paperwork? Because it can be more simple than you might think, but you've just got to be really careful over, obviously, things like allergens and knowledge of certain areas. So that's probably all I'm going to say on food safety, except that, you know, you do need to have public liability insurance, or your group does, and a risk assessment. And there are links to templates for risk assessment. Try and keep them as user friendly and simple as possible. And then we thought we must touch on funding and food, because obviously that they're both key to setting something up. Access to regular pots of money is always useful for obviously buying food, paying for any equipment, utilities. You might even want to hire another a trained cook to come and support you for a few months while you get going, if you were able to access the money. But our team let us know that there's quite a few pots and funding databases where you can search for relevant pots of money as well. So we have all the details behind the names of these pots of funding. So, for example, Awards for All is a small pots of funding with a quick turnaround and a high success rate. So we've listed a few, so we can send those out after this. And then also in terms of food, you've probably heard that a lot of people use surplus food. For sure, we use Fair Share a lot. You can sign up for a food membership. I think we pay about £26 a week for 80 kilos of food, and that's been intercepted at various points in the supply chain. So it might be chicken with a few days life still on it, you know, obviously nothing out of date in terms of high risk food. Yeah, it's a really good deal signing up to Fair Share. But there are other free ways to access food, and this will be in the guide as well, such as Fair Share Go, which is an app where you sign up to collect food at the end of the day from supermarkets, you know, like vegetables that have reached before date, but they've still got plenty of life in them in terms of their quality. And of course, there's donations. There might be local businesses that are happy to sponsor you. Local growing spaces, you get gluts at various points in the year. So yeah, there are quite a few access areas in terms of food as well. In terms of volunteering, I'm going to hand over to Estelle very shortly, but I suppose the real key to running these community meals are volunteers, and particularly in areas of need. It can be quite challenging to find enough volunteers to support you. I mean, I know in our cafes we try to encourage a real sense of community and encourage people to help clear tables, set tables up, come and do some washing up, all in it together. And we found some great kitchen assistants. You get talking to people and who've maybe a real struggle recently, but they've worked as a chef when they were younger, and they come and help us in the kitchen, and those are really nice moments, and they become part of the team as well. But I thought I'd hand over to Estelle for a couple of minutes. Would you like to give us your perspective on volunteering? You're on mute at the moment. Estelle, you're on mute. Oh.
Mute. Right, there we go.
Mute.
Can you hear me now?
We can, thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, I apologise. Somebody's decided to cut trees outside the house, so this is the quietest room. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
We can.
Good, great. Okay, so yeah, as you just said, volunteers are essential. You can't run without them because you have to have people. You know, it's like the main part of the whole thing. If you haven't got the people to run it, then it doesn't happen. The most important thing is that you have a plan in place when you start. I'm a big fan of lists. You know, you need to constantly keep updating yourself when you're organising your cafe. So you need to have a list of all of the people that you're going to require in that setting. So you'll need chefs, you're going to need people who meet and greet, you're going to have people that serve, talk to people, you're going to have people washing up, setting up tables. There can be quite a lot of physical work involved. So you'll have different people that suit different roles, and it's good for you to write down everything that you need, and as you find people, sort of allocate them to that particular area. As you're discussing it with them, you'll find, you know, what their particular skill is. Definitely the chef is important, because you're getting food that you don't know what you're going to have from sort of, you know, week to week. So you've got to have that creativity, someone who's able to make a meal out of what's arrived on the day. So I think sometimes it can help to have someone who's actually a trained chef, if you haven't got somebody who can fill that role, that can get you going until you can get somebody in and train them yourselves. Again, if you're struggling with that, you could do very simple meals. It's important to keep a record of things like what you would put on your menu. You want to keep it simple, just doing soups. You know, the planning is key, really, you know, because it's always knowing where you are in the process, and you can tick your boxes as you go, saying yes, we've got those people in place. You can also never have enough volunteers. You know, if you've got 20 people coming to you, which is great, and you think, oh, we probably only need 10, you get 20 people, because you always need people to fall back on in case certain volunteers can't turn up for any reason. Having a backup of volunteers is great. Also, it needs to be really accessible for the volunteers to be able to get to. Will they be coming on a bus, or they'll be driving? As central as possible, really. Obviously, again, that's also for the guests. You want somewhere. I think that's why the bridge works so well, because it's a central place. So it's easy for people to come and volunteer, and it's easy for people to actually come to the meal. The more out of the way you are, obviously, the harder it is for everybody. Timing as well, that's important. what's going to be the best time for volunteers to actually offer their time. Evenings sometimes can be difficult because if people are working, you know, they might not be able to get there on time. I found through the years that people who are actually retired can be a real useful resource because they've got something, you know, want to fill their time with something that's really rewarding. And they've also got the availability, which is really good. It's again, it's about the place that you're actually setting it up will depend on the sort of people that you're going to get who are volunteering.
I think that's a brilliant starter for Tennisdale, and I think when you were saying, you know, if you just want to start with soups, start small, you know, and then because you do need enough people to fulfil the roles, and a bit more than enough because you know it's voluntary, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, offering anything is good. So if you start and you can only just offer soup, you know, that's better than, and you can sort of grow from that then. So, you know, don't make it too much of a you know, oh, we need to be offering a 3-course meal, you know, because that's really putting yourself under pressure to actually produce a lot of food, you know, whereas if you start off small, then you can gradually feel your way through it. You get, you know, people get more confident as they, you know, do the job. And that's what you want. You know, you want everybody to enjoy it because that's the key. You don't want to go and volunteer and think, oh, you know, that was, I didn't really like that. You know, you want everybody to have fun while they're doing it. One of the things we always used to do was just put put some music on in the kitchen. You know, make it you want to make this a good way of making new friends. You know, there's so many positive things for volunteering. You know, it offers people opportunities if they've not been out, they've been out of work, they want to have get the confidence back with meeting people, talking to, you know, your volunteers. You can make a really good group of friends. Yeah, there's a lot of positives to it. And it's, well,
I was going to say, I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm going to have to move on in a bit. But
yeah, of course, yeah.
I'd really like to capture everything you've said and put that in the guide, actually, Estelle. It's really helpful. And then if there's anything else as well, we can add that. Was there anything else you wanted to finally add? I don't want to. Just
one of the things is managing volunteers' expectations, because it can take a long time to set something up. So they need to know, like, a timeline, really, sometimes, you know, that it could be a few weeks, months before you're actually at that point. So just keep volunteers in the loop. That's really important, you know, so they're part of the process. So it's their project, you know, you want everybody on board.
Great. Oh, thank you. That's really brought it to life, actually. I've done a better job than if I'd have just read through this slide. Thank you so much.
No problem.
That's really great. I'm going to whiz through so that we can go to the bridge and have enough time for that before breakouts. I just wanted to put on there's different models that I've seen, and I'm sure there's more out there, but you know, we run the pay as you feel cafe, so you pay according to your means. So you might not have any money, but you're happy to help out in a cafe, or you know, maybe you're not ready for that and you just really need a free meal, but you can do something later on and help out. It'd be great to see more youth-led cafes. I mean, you know, to have something for young people to do after school that's healthy, where, you know, good food is involved, a real community spirit. I think that would be brilliant to see across the country. If you're thinking, I'm not ready to go the environmental health full-blown 3-course meal, I'm just going to start with a cup of tea and a cake. There are places of welcome. It's a really great website. It's building a network of communities across the country that can offer real community for people. As you can see, pop in for a cuppa and I think it says cake. So that's also an option. Communal dining is a great thing that's going on in some cities. I know that YMCA North Staffordshire do this amazing thing where they put on a monthly communal meal. And I think corporates are queuing up basically to to use it as a volunteering experience. So they go in, pay for the food and cook the food, and then everybody from society is welcome to come and share a meal once a month in the YMCA hall. And that's a fantastic model. And then also, you know, with the cost of living, getting people together, doing some batch cooking, sitting down together to eat, and then taking some extra food home. That's something we're trialing at the moment, and it really brings people together very quickly. And you have, you know, shoulder to shoulder conversations with everybody that's coming in. So that's a bit of a favourite as well. So, right, shall we go over to Andrea? Let's see if this works. I think I'm going to have to stop sharing, and then I've literally got one slide left after that. So I think Andrea L, the other Andrea, is going to put you on spotlight because we've got Estelle on.
Yeah, I need that. Oh, Estelle, if you could mute yourself, that would help.
Yeah.
I need if the other Andrea could like start speaking. I can't. It's Andrea Lowndes, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's right. We've got a max of about 4 minutes, haven't we? But let's see what we can.
Yeah. I'm trying to. She's just not coming up.
She looks like she's.
Hi.
Here we go.
Yeah. Oh wait, I just. No, I don't think it's not going through.
So Fangela.
Hi. Sorry, it's moving around has proved difficult. Am I? Have you got me?
Oh yeah, we've got you.
We've got you. Show us what.
Okay. It's really noisy in here, so I'm just going to talk and hope that you can hear me. And I'm just going to give you a quick pan round the room. So you can see behind me, very important sign, food allergies and allergens. Obviously that's up. There's a little chart here about allergies as well, but I'm just gonna, I don't know if people can see in here.
Yes, we can.
Room. Here we are. So this is our menu for today. So there's probably about 60 people in here at the moment. We'll probably get a few more. I'm just going to do a quick pan around. Hello. Somebody's just calling my name. So here we go. Here we go. So this is us in here. This is some of my team. This is Rachel.
Hi, Rachel.
Who heads up our volunteers. It's busy in the kitchen, so I'm just going to very quickly take you in, have a quick whiz round in here. There we go. It's very noisy, so I hope you could get a glimpse of that.
Oh, thank you, Andrea. It's great to see. We can hear you. So we've literally got a couple of minutes, but do you want to just tell us how it started? What made you start this up?
Okay, right. I've gone in a quieter room. So we had an approach from a lady who she at that time was working as a local area coordinator for Solihull Council. And she approached us because she was trying to get people involved in community activities, and she was noticing that she was coming across more and more people who were struggling to eat, and she asked if we had thought about starting up a community lunch for people to come and get a hot meal. So we began to do some investigations, and we contacted environmental health to get our kitchen inspected and make sure that we had all the setup. We contacted FareShare to see how much it would be. We were fortunate that our youth pastor in the church was also a trained chef. So in his previous role, he'd worked as a chef, and then we got a team of volunteers together to see if we had enough people to get up and running to run a community lunch.
Oh, that's fantastic. And it's really established. So you're actually catering for a lot of people, aren't you? And I know that it, you know.
Yeah, so we have around, I would say around 50 to 70 people most weeks. And we started doing some food parcels during COVID, and because obviously we couldn't open, and those have carried on to a very limited extent. So some people who come here come for a food parcel. We encourage them to have a meal as well. Most of them do, but we keep food aside to give to specific people, and anything surplus we'll give away to anyone else as well.
Oh, thank you. I think what we'll do is in the guide, I'm going to put all the things that you told us in your when we came to see it, because it's so well run. This is an example, I suppose, of a slightly larger scale, really established lunch. Great team of volunteers. Everyone's clear what their role is. I know that you say customers, sometimes it's their only hot meal that week.
Yeah.
And you do rely on some pots of funding from Heart of England Foundation, the Asda community grants, and donations from the congregation. So it's oh, thank you, that's so great.
I hope you saw something. It's quite hard to see. It's very noisy in there as well, so I'm glad you saw a bit of life happening anyway. So yeah,
definitely, thank you so much. I'm going to do 30 seconds on this slide because it's important. Thank you, Andrea. This is just another example. It's a weekly lunch club for over 55s, and it's run for people of Caribbean and African communities. So they were invited to Britain initially to build back Britain. They had to rely on themselves to build communities. As they've gotten older, their capacity for going back home, it's more limited now. So there's a lunch club to bring them together. And yeah, it's another great example, and some top tips from Jackie, who helps running, really, about accessing small pots of funding to keep things ticking over, and just make sure you have people to support you, you know, to go through when times are tough or you're facing any barriers. So that's it, with a massive thanks to everybody that's helped support us.
Amazing. This has been so inspiring. And of course, there's so much to share. And I think I'm gonna stop recording now because we're about, so we have a short time